Well, hello and welcome to the Meno Lounge. I'm Julie Gordon-White, CEO of MenoWell, Menopause Energy and Protein Bars, and I missed you guys. We've had 2 weeks with no Meno Lounge. I got called for jury duty last week, and the week before, Dr. Jane had a family emergency. Hi there, Kelly. I was so sad. I missed you so much, but we have the perfect guest today to bring us back into the Meno Lounge. I feel a little rusty, quite frankly. And I'm going to see if I can bring her on. I love you're all jumping on because you know who we have today. Let's see here. All right, this is the awkward part. Talk amongst yourselves while I do this, please. Here we go. She is a perfect person to have on during the month about heart and protecting our heart, but we're going to talk about the other kind of heart thing, the love and pleasure today. Let's see. I see Gabriella. You are scooting in. There you are.
Hello. How are you, Julie?
Hi, Gabriella. I always say you're my favorite G. Well, actually, my daughter's Georgia, so she's my favorite G. Then you're my second favorite G. Goes with Gabriella and gorgeous. So glad to see you.
So lovely to see you. Thank you so much. And I'm so excited about this conversation.
Me too. In the month of love, and you are the queen of pleasure and all the good things, founder of Women's Body Wisdom. I want to say that right, because when I first met you, we were talking about yoga, and then it evolved, although I think you had this kind of thing happening in the background that I didn't really know about at the time.
Well, I'll talk about how yoga really has informed everything that I do, right? That has been my constant companion through all phases of my life, and it really has informed the work that I do today. So I want to honor the yoga tradition, the yoga practice, and there are philosophies of yoga that speak to this idea of pleasure. We can talk about that later, but yeah, it's all there. Yoga encompasses this whole life that we live, and pleasure is definitely one of those aspects.
I can't wait. Are we going to talk about Kundalini yoga? Is that the one that you're talking about? Yeah, all kinds of things behind there. But before we jump in, I think we're talking today about finding pleasure in the pause, finding pleasure during midlife, bringing it into our experience and journey in menopause. So should we define what you mean by pleasure? Because I think, it has a connotation that we think of immediately, but I know you have other layers to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question, because when we're in the midst of so many changes in the menopause transition and discomfort, I don't want to bypass the symptoms, everything that we're experiencing, but our minds are wired to go to what feels uncomfortable, to what feels unpleasant. So when you tap into your body, when I ask people, what is it that you feel in your body, we go straight to discomfort. We go
to negative right away, right?
Yeah.
That's the first thing we look for.
A little bit that kind of is annoying for me when I hear about all the menopause talk, because of course we have to educate ourselves on the symptoms, of course. But I think we can get so mired in them that we just live in this constellation of symptoms all the time. But when we allow ourselves, we are wired to feel pleasure. So for me, pleasure is a sense of goodness, a sense of aliveness, a sense of vitality that we hold innately in our bodies. And we have access to that if we just allow ourselves the right intention, the right time, the right awareness. And so pleasure is accessible to everyone. And it's life, the yogis see pleasure and sexuality as our life force. It's chi, it's what animates nature, it's what animates our bodies, it's what makes the world go round. And so when we are feeling like, when we're feeling all the symptoms, we're not getting enough sleep, we're tired, we're, all name your symptom, name one of the 34 symptoms.
Exactly.
It's difficult to orient to pleasure. It's difficult to turn towards pleasure, but with the right intention, I love to call on my yoga practice, right? Yoga teaches us to set an intention in our practice and in our day. So making pleasure an intentional practice that we call in, that we invite into our bodies, into our lives on a day-to-day basis with little, small kind of intentional ways. We're not going straight to sexual pleasure because, you have to speak truth. It's hard to go there when you are in the midst
Right.
of,
When one of those
symptoms.
specific symptoms is kicking in and the Mojave Desert is happening.
Yeah. And so when you say, grab a vibrator, go towards pleasure, it's going to make us feel worse than we already are. It's going to make us feel I'm broken. This is my body. My body's giving up on me. But when we turn to goodness, when we turn to vitality, when we turn to that sense of aliveness that is within us, then we can start cultivating it intentionally, little by little, every day. And so it just starts with setting pleasure as a daily intention. And so an intention is a short, positive statement of intent that's inspired by your wish to heal, to change, or to enhance an aspect of your life. So it's not, I don't think, for me, intention setting is not something you can think yourself into. It's really something you feel yourself into. It's an embodied practice. That means that intention lives in you as an energetic quality, as a stirring of your heart's deepest longing and desire. So setting an intention invites you to, requires you to take time to connect with your body and notice where you are called to observe or to witness or bring to awareness in that your body. And when you feel, you're going to feel a little glimmer. I mean, we all have access to that, a little glimmer of
we
that.
We just don't stop long enough to listen to it, right? Or we don't get quiet enough to hear it.
That glimmer of that intention will reveal itself to you. So you can't just say, okay, I'm going to think my way into this and this is my intention. You really have to feel your way into it. In this act of really listening deeply to ourselves, also, it involves noticing things you desire, things that we may have like dismissed in the past or not prioritized or shut down. So it can be very, very vulnerable, right? It can be a very vulnerable process, but I feel it's a very healing and a very enlivening process. So
I agree. Intentions are so powerful. I've always used them, but I love what you're saying about embodying them, because I have come to my daily intentions from a thinking place, usually, from up here, not always from here, but I let it drop from a thought, an idea. Oh, here's my intention. I need to focus on this. This is what I need to take care of, or who today, to like, oh, how does that feel? Does that feel right? Like that feels off. Like today's not the day for that. I'm not, my energy is not aligned to handle that situation, or like, let's go. Right. So what do you think about coming at it from that place? Because I can't always access it from the other.
Yes, exactly. That's you said it perfectly. You have to involve the mind, and you have to start from a cognitive place, of course, right? And then really dropping in and feeling, whether that is really what you truly want to call in, right? Where does that reside in you? Where does that intention live in your body? Is it a heartfelt intention? Is it live in your belly? What does it feel like? What is the quality of it? I think when you drop into the quality of that intention, you can cultivate it more. You can, expand it more. You can, focus on that intention as like I said, as an energetic quality or as a sensation. And with certain practices, mind body practices like breath work, visualization, meditation, I love using the the visual of like it spreads like food coloring throughout your body. So you can start here in your heart, And then, with the right intention, with the right practice, you can just spread that sense of pleasure, or that intention that you're setting throughout your body, like food coloring. And then it spreads out into your daily
I
actions,
can
right?
actually
You put
feel that when you say that, when you're saying, food coloring, I can literally feel, or like honey, or, color, or something like that coming through. And that's so much more powerful way to operate versus straight to-dos, right? Straight, got to take care of this today, but where are you aligned? Now, there's days when we have to just do what we have to do, right? But even bringing in the word that you use that I love is quality, because when you have that quality behind that intention, or even at that to do, it brings it to a whole different level, doesn't it? Not just checking the boxes.
Yeah. And so you could start in your mind with the idea of, like, how can I invite more pleasure into my life, into my daily life? And instead of like making the list, which, lists are good, and checking them off.
I get a lot of pleasure out of checking those things off, right?
Instead of making it another thing on your to-do list, really kind of feel into it, right? Feel into it. Again, observe the quality, and then from there, create that intention. And you can write it down, whatever comes up. So you can go from here to here, and maybe something else bubbles up to the surface. You write it down, you look at your intention, you let your body, you let the words land in your body, right? Some people are very visual. So just by looking at your intention on a piece of paper, taking a few rounds of breath, and then really considering it, really taking it into your day, That's how you go about setting an intention.
I love that. It's so important. I don't want anyone to skip over it, because it can feel like, oh, that's just a yoga thing, or something like that, a spiritual thing. But actually, it really shapes our whole lives. It shapes our days. It shapes our businesses. It shapes our relationships. When we take a minute and think, is this for me? How am I feeling about it, before we step, like literally walk into a meeting, sit at our desk, like that physical movement forward. It's life-changing, really.
Absolutely.
So.
And what you're doing is you're creating, there's a whole, science behind it. You're creating new pathways in your brain, new neural pathways to orient to that intention, right? It's like you veer off, and like something in your body reminds you to get back.
What we said. Yeah.
And we're always going to have those, right? I call them, obstacles to pleasure, right? We're always going to have those obstacles to pleasure, but you're going to be more aware of them. You're going to be more aware of those obstacles to pleasure when you have that intention, when you've set that intention. So, obstacles to pleasure, really, they're just those pesky habits that block us from getting out of our heads and into our bodies. And it's really the intention setting, the awareness of a yoga practice or a mindfulness practice or a meditation practice can bring awareness to those habits and set you back on the path of your intention. So you make it a practice. So you're present to sensation on every level when you veer off of that intention. So, endless to-do tasks, the habits that block pleasure, endless to-do tasks, stress and overwhelm, negative self-talk. we're all guilty
well, and
of that.
especially all these things in midlife, right? Because we are filled with tasks to do, generally taking care of ourselves, other people, work, career, business, on. Our bodies. Hello, that was kind of at the bottom of the list. Why did I say that last, right? But and it's hard. It's hard not to just do the thing that we are used to doing all the time. So why, Gabriella, in midlife, can you just expand on, is it so much more important that we connect to this idea of pleasure to navigate through menopause when we're doing all the things and not really always feeling so great?
So orienting towards pleasure in midlife allows you, like I said, to create new neural pathways to experience pleasure in all aspects of your life. And if you want to increase more sexual pleasure, and we can talk about sexual pleasure, right? It allows you to slowly build up to a satisfying and fulfilling sexual life as well. So when you start, so again, when I work with clients and they come to me and they're like, my libido is shot. I don't feel, I don't feel any kind of sexual pleasure. I'm not there. My sex life is over. We start here. We start very simply with setting the intention of introducing pleasure into everyday life, simple things. It can be sensory pleasure, tapping into the five senses. It can be enjoying a cup of tea. It can be spending time in nature, moving your body, so many, wearing your favorite color, starting a self-pleasure practice, which we can talk about. So starting very slow and gently and gradually, building those pleasure pathways can lead to greater sexual pleasure down the road if that's where you want to go to. When women tell me their sex lives are over, they're done, they just don't want to go there, it saddens me. It really does. I'm like, okay, we'll start here and see where that leads you. Just start here.
Like you, I talk to so many women who are ready just to set it aside because maybe it's painful or the energy, the desire is not there. But I kind of landed in the space of it's part of our health, like women's wellness, to make sure that all the parts of our body are active and being used, because if not, they just go away. It's like a muscle, they're gone. And then we have other health issues that come from that when we're not using all of our lady parts. And so that actually was a bit of a Kickstarter for me, like, I don't want things to just atrophy and go away. So how do we get back in the groove of all of that? And maybe baby steps like you're talking about is how we do it. But that's just one thought that really was different for me, in that it's an important part of our health to have all of our tissues, organs active, not dormant. What do you think about that, Gabriella?
Oh, absolutely. And I think sometimes it's difficult when you're in the midst of menopause to that's why I think it's really a really exploratory practice for yourself. It's a self-exploration, this idea of waking up pleasure, of exploring sexual pleasure. It's really something that you have to own for yourself. We so often, I have a history of doing this, right? We give our pleasure and our power away, right? We give it away when
you're not
I didn't realize
alone.
Something that belonged to me, that I could own for myself, that I could literally take it into my own hands, right?
Yeah.
And as we navigate through midlife, right, our bodies change, our sexuality changes. We just have to acknowledge that, what worked in our 20s, 30s, 40s isn't going to work the same now. So it really is a process of getting to know yourself more intimately. And I say it's a radical act of self-love, because we, and many of us struggle with this idea of self-love, but it really is a radical act of self-love, getting to know yourself intimately. And it really just all starts with you. And again, you can start with those baby steps, setting your pleasure as an intention, and then gradually embarking on a practice of self-pleasure. So a large part of cultivating a loving and empowered relationship with yourself is self-intimacy. And so, as I mentioned, as our bodies change and evolve in midlife, we have to know ourselves in a different way. We have to get to know ourselves and what's changed. And starting a self-pleasure practice is a wonderful way to connect with your body and get to know yourself sensually and sexually. So what self-pleasure it does, it invites curiosity to what feels good, to what feels pleasurable, to what turns you on, and considers the whole body. So we're not starting at the genitals.
Right.
We're starting, your whole body is a pleasure zone. Your whole body has access to pleasure.
I think that's a big piece, because so many women in menopause or perimenopause, are focused on the act. the one act versus, I don't want to say all the words because we don't want to get our Instagram shut down today, but versus intimacy, which that's what I think is the gift of menopause. It calls us women back to our bodies, and there's so much more that we can explore as part of our intimacy than the one thing. Like the one thing is just like, okay, but there's so much more, and it gives us a chance because maybe if painful sex is a thing, then there's so many other things you can experience without that. It gives us a chance to mix it up. I forgot to say that if there's kids in the room, not today, but yeah, you can mix it up. So that's what I like.
The word intimacy, right? If you really kind of break it up, into me, I see. Into me, I see. And it is really that act of reconnecting with yourself and getting to know yourself better and establishing that intimate relationship with yourself. So yeah, your whole body is capable of experiencing pleasure. And there are some places in the female body that are more sensitive to pleasure than others. So it just takes a little bit of exploration. There are erogenous zones that are more highly sensitive. So giving yourself the time and space to explore that through touch, through breath, through movement, through journaling, right? Even journaling is a great way to do that. I have on my Linktree, I have a 7-day pleasure body journal. So it's a 7 days of journaling prompts that allows you to explore your relationship to pleasure, what it means to you, right? What it means to you. I highly, highly recommend starting there and then exploring, right? Self-pleasure. There's no right way or wrong way to do it. And it is really about using those aspects of journaling, breath, movement, touch, and exploring what there is to be felt and what really lights you up. And then you can communicate this to a partner if you wish, and notice how that really changes the dynamic, right? Dynamic between you and a partner.
Especially if you've been in a long-term relationship. Why did I say it like that? Long, right? I'm coming up on my 33rd wedding anniversary.
Whoa.
Yeah, Gabriella, I know you've been with your husband a long time also.
Yeah, we're heading into 23.
Yeah, 23. Right? So, and that's another opening, no pun intended, another opening to really have a conversation that maybe you haven't had or is overdue, right?
Yeah. I mean, when I was going through, I literally woke up one day when I was in perimenopause and it was like the light switched off, the libido light switched off. It was gone. I had no idea what was happening. I had no idea. I realized I knew so little about my body, so little, because I had given that pleasure away. I had put it in the hands of someone else, right? And that worked. That was great for a while, but then until it just stopped. And then I really had to go through this process of getting to know myself. I started a self-pleasure practice, and I told my husband, right, this is something I'm doing for myself. I know so little about my body, and I want to know more about what lights me up, what turns me on, and it's only going to help us in the long run. So he was fine with that, didn't feel intimidated. He now gets to the point where, like, you haven't done your self-pleasure practice, have you, Gabriella?
He's like, I can tell you're cranky. Is that what that means?
And I'm like, repelled by any advancement. It's like, Gabriella, you haven't been doing your self-pleasure practice.
I love it. Isn't that funny? But I love that you actually shared that, because a lot of women would have a hard time actually making that announcement. Oh, by the way, I've started a new practice here.
Yeah. And also at the time, because I did certify as a sexuality coach, once I started down that route, it did take, prioritizing my pleasure and prioritizing investing in my pleasure. So I was investing in my pleasure. I have invested quite a bit in my pleasure as a coach and as a means of self-exploration. So it did take that kind of financial conversation, right? And, you know, say, I am worthy of this, you know, and a lot of women come to me when we, you know, when we meet up and talk about coaching one-to-one. I have to check with my husband if I can spend this kind of money. You know, it's like, okay, you are worthy of pleasure, right? Investing in your pleasure is the best investment you can make.
And maybe in your relationship too.
Exactly. And so we have that little conversation, right? And I know how it feels because it felt uncomfortable, but I knew from just a deeply rooted place that I was worthy of this, and my pleasure was worth investing in, and my relationship was worth investing in terms of, you know, expanding the possibilities, the pleasure possibilities. So
it gives it's got an exponential result for everyone.
Absolutely. And not only in your relationship, it feeds into how you show up in your work, how you show up, your creative life force. I feel more creative, I would have never started my own business, I don't think, if I wasn't more connected to my pleasure. And so I think it expands so many other possibilities, how you show up for your work, for your life, for your family, for your community. It really is life-giving.
Well, when you're connected to your body, you're more confident.
Oh, of course. Yes. Yeah. You feel more confident, and
that's where that energy comes from. And yeah, you know who you are.
So, yeah. It's not only about confidence in the bedroom, it's confidence out of the bedroom. That's what it helps shape, for sure.
Well, and taking it out of the bedroom, when we are connecting to pleasure, things that make us happy, what I like is that it forces us to slow down. Because you can't discover something yummy, like tasting something or smelling something or seeing something, if you're just rushing. Gabriella, have you heard of rushing woman syndrome?
Yes. It makes sense. Yes.
Well, we know a lot of women.
I know all about it. Yes.
But yeah, that's a real thing. And we miss out on all the pleasures of life when we're just rushing because we don't see all the amazing things or smell or taste the things that are right in front of us. So that's what I love about connecting back to your pleasure outside.
And one of the main pillars of my practice or of my work is what I call, you know, resting in pleasure. Resting in pleasure, RIP, but not the other, but resting in pleasure. And really, you know, life can feel so full, and we have our foot on the accelerator, and all the things are happening. Our nervous systems are on high alert. Our minds are buzzing. It's so hard. It's so easy to turn away from pleasure, and we have no time. We're too tired. It just doesn't matter. But when we turn towards restful pleasure, we get to slow down. We get to slow down and welcome and invite pleasure into our life. So there's a wonderful format of resting in pleasure. Well, I kind of adopted this format from the 5 types of rest by a woman named Dr. Sandra Dalton Smith from her book, Sacred Rest. So I incorporate her 5 types of rest into my rest and pleasure kind of modality. So the 5 types of rest, because you need to be relaxed in order to be receptive to pleasure. That's what we realize. If you're constantly in rushing women's syndrome and you're in your head, you're not in your body, you're not going to be receptive to it. You
can't. Right. You won't see it.
All signals are off. All signals are off. So
good. I'm excited to hear those 5. Yeah.
Starting off with rest. There's physical rest, right? So practicing restorative yoga or yoga nidra, a walk in nature, maybe just closing your eyes for 20 minutes of uninterrupted rest. There's mental rest, so taking a break from social media, from work, from phones, from screens, to allow yourself to settle maybe into a mindful breathing practice, mindfulness meditation, maybe some slow deep breathing, some positive affirmations, or just gazing out the window to daydream. Just allow yourself to do that. Just give yourself a mental rest break. Then there's sensory rest. So finding time to engage with the five senses, sight, touch, taste, hearing, smell. It could be listening to music, a delicious home cooked meal, the touch of a loved one. And then there's emotional rest, right? Putting your thoughts into a journal, right? Letting it all come up and have some kind of way to process. So putting your thoughts into a journal, voicing your thoughts to a friend or a therapist or a coach. And then social rest. I always love this, especially when we get together at, different gatherings, surrounding yourself with positive and supportive people. Really, just that always fills me up, just fills up my cup, right? And then, but you also have to set your boundaries with friends and family, and excuse yourself from extended social gatherings if it gets to be too much, taking, time out for you.
Right.
And then finally, the last one is creative rest. So engaging in a creative hobby, such as writing, painting, photography, dancing. So when we broaden the lens of rest, because some women just say, I can't rest. I can't afford
stop.
to take
I can't sit down.
I can't
You hear that all the time.
But
I can't.
how about if we widen the lens of rest and see it in these other ways? Because those types of rest do benefit us in so many ways. Bring us into that parasympathetic state, allow us to feel connected to ourselves and to others. And so we start there, because a relaxed body is a pleasured body.
That's so good. And Carlika, thank you so much for, she wrote all those in the chat. So if you want to go back and look at all the 5 types of rest.
Thank you, Carlika.
You see Carlika. So yeah, that's so delicious. Yes, I love that as the foundation of pleasure, because without rest, we cannot relax enough. We can't connect. And that's not just in the bedroom, outside, at your desk, when you got a whole day ahead of you. And if you cannot relax in the moment, you can't set the intention of who you're going to be, how you're going to show up for your team, or in your meeting with a client, with a customer, all of those things. So really delicious, Gabriella. I always feel like we could just like talk and talk and talk. I wrote down, I know you had tips, but we kind of wove them all into all the things that we talked about.
Them all in, yeah. I don't know what else I would say. I wrote a blog post today about the importance of sex education for midlife women, right? And weaving this into the idea of pleasure and in the broader sense, because again, it's sort of shifting what we were taught so little about pleasure and our sexual health when we were young. So it really shifts the lens on pleasure and sexuality, especially when we're experiencing those changes that affect, the whole constellation of symptoms, the genitourinary syndrome of menopause. We know all of those, dryness, pain, irritation, urinary UTIs, right? Frequent urination, all the things. So really educating ourselves about our sexual health. I'm really on a campaign to do this, because it's I myself was so clueless when I moved into perimenopause about my own sexual health. I didn't even know what all my parts were called.
I forgot. I think I used to know, but after 3 babies, and I don't have time for that. So
so it really helps us to understand the changes our bodies are going through, understand menopause and the hormonal changes and how they affect our sexual health and pleasure. It also allows us to, gently move into this exploring our own sexual anatomy and function. We got to know that, right? We have to really know that, because that puts power back in our hands. So understanding how your female anatomy works. And then this also leads to what I've been talking about, promotes, intimacy by providing you with information that you can then relay to a partner. And this leads to more fulfilling and satisfying intimacy. And so, I'm such a big proponent. And then there's, the things that we don't often talk about, really understanding some of the risk factors as we age, as we move through menopause,
Right.
gynecological issues, pelvic floor, pelvic organ issues,
Right.
all of those things are really, really important to know
That's why
about. And then,
sexual health goes together, right?
yeah.
Health, really,
And
really important.
then one of the most important things is that it also, when you empower yourself with this knowledge, it really helps you cultivate a more positive body image and self-acceptance, which is something,
Right.
I know we all struggle with.
Right.
So, understanding how amazing our bodies are, right? Understanding how amazing can foster positive body image and self-acceptance as we move through the menopause transition, and understanding about the diversity of all women's bodies, can just prioritize, our own self-care and our own well-being. So yeah, it all starts with getting to know yourself more intimately. And I know that
Beautiful.
when we go through that process, it can feel very vulnerable. A lot of conditioning, social conditioning, family narratives can come up, but that's when the time is right to dive into
Well,
and
we're ready. We're ready in midlife, right? We've already quieted ourselves, hid, and didn't talk about things, but now we can be out loud because we've been around the block, and it's okay to ask for what you want, ask for what you need. And one of the things I was thinking about as you were pulling all that together, Gabriella, is at the end of the day, self-love is really where it starts. That when we love ourselves, we're willing to allow pleasure in our lives. We want to take care of our bodies. Health matters, relationships matter, intimacy matters. And so it's sort of like setting intention that we can start from the body out, right? The heart out, setting intention, but sometimes we need to start from the head and drop in. And so if we think about pleasure as self-love, right, we can start there, and then all the good things can come from that. Or you can take it from the outside and go there, but that's really the ultimate thing, is self-love.
yeah,
Self-love.
absolutely. And strengthening that relationship with ourselves,
Yeah.
so we can then enrich our connections with others. And it just sets the tone. It sets the tone for so many aspects of our lives. And so, uh, I think there's a debate whether, does it have to start with self-love? Am I lovable if I don't love myself? Of course you are lovable, but it does change. You are lovable even if you haven't started with that deep sense of self-love,
Right.
but just knowing that it can set a different tone when you have that deep, loving relationship with yourself.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Sometimes we can struggle with self-love, but it doesn't, it's just the core. It's there whenever we're ready to accept it, welcome it, and we can get there lots of different ways, from rest, from pleasure, on. But going back to, we're worth it. In midlife, we've earned our way here. We've earned your way to self-love. So we can just make a decision. That's how I think about it. Just decide,
Absolutely.
I love myself. I love all the parts, the jiggly parts, the dry parts, the not so dry parts, the funny, the cranky, like all the things. So
Yes.
to me, that's what love is.
Self-acceptance. Yeah. It all starts with you. Everything starts with you, says Carlita.
Carlika's
Absolutely.
just on it today, as
She
always.
is
Thank you,
on it.
Carlika.
Yeah.
Make sure you're following Carlika also. She's does a lot of
Yeah.
wonderful things in
Yeah.
midlife women too. So
Definitely.
um,
Definitely.
Gabriella, as we pull this together, because I could always have 50 million hours of conversation with you. I want to talk about chakras at some point, but next time we'll talk about that. But what does MenoWell mean to you?
Oh, MenoWell. Yeah. I think it's really that, starting from that place of self-love and moving into, um, moving into a finding pleasure. That's why I love the hashtag pleasure in the pause, really finding pleasure in those moments of stillness, of quiet, of those in-between spaces, and really using that as a starting point to menopause well, right? Using that as you're putting pleasure in the driving seat, right? And really making it, inviting it, and making pleasure an intentional practice that you invite into your life every day. And I think you will see, and pleasure makes room. When you do that, you make room for the discomforts, and the not so comfortable aspects of menopause, right? We're not bypassing that, but when you make more room for pleasure, pleasure allows us to hold all of it. It really allows us to hold the whole experience of menopause.
Love it. I love it. It allows us to hold all of it, the whole experience. Huge, huge, huge. Thank you.
Definitely.
So good. Where can people follow you? Let's see, we're talking menopause, intentional practice. Love it. Thanks. See, there we go. Gabriella, where can people find all things amazing Gabriella Espinosa?
So at Gabriella Espinosa is my Instagram handle. On my Linktree, if you go to my Linktree, you can download the Pleasure Body Journal, the 7-day Pleasure Body Journal. And that, when you do that, you're on my mailing list, and I send out an email every week with tips and, inspiration on how to live a life of pleasure and how to find pleasure in the pause. And I think I did announce last week, and I'm working on that, of starting a podcast where I talk. It's mostly some self-reflection. It's mostly me talking, some solo podcasts, which I will load up onto a YouTube channel. I'm starting a YouTube channel, so that's going to be coming soon.
Awesome.
And doing all those little things just to sort of widen my reach, so that Instagram doesn't censor me.
I know, right?
Other avenues to communicate this work that I love to do so much.
Which is so needed. It's so needed. It's such a gift to women in the stages of menopause to have you comfortably share how to connect back to our bodies and our pleasure, all the things that we deserve. So thank you for all you do, Gabriella.
Thank you for having me. It's always such a pleasure to be in your company, to talk to you, to just witness your beautiful energy. Thank you.
Same. I hope to see you in person really soon.
We have to make that happen very soon.
Soon. Well, thanks for being here, and make sure you follow Gabriella on Instagram if you're not already, and download that journal.
Yes,
because it is nice. I know. All right, everybody.
So much.
Be well.
There's Sophia. Oh wow, wonderful.
So many wonderful people here.
Thank
okay, everyone. See you next time. Take care. Thank you, Gabriella.
Bye. You're welcome.
Bye.